Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we're going to be examining the mind, not as an object of reality, but as an illusion, as a myth. With me is Mr. Uppaluri Krishnamurti, a philosopher and world traveler. Uppaluri is the author of several books based on his conversations. One is called The Mystique of Enlightenment, and the other is Mind is a Myth. He's sometimes thought of as an anti-guru, as a man who defies all definition, as a reluctant sage. Welcome, Uppaluri.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be with you. In your thinking, if I can call it that, you seem to suggest that the mind isn't real in the sense that there's no mind separate from the body. Is that
Yes.
fair?
What is there is only the body. So where is mind? If there is a mind, is it separate from or distinct from the activity of the brain? You see? So it is very difficult to deal with the question of mind. You see, we are only familiar with the definitions. The topic is mind is a myth, but the series you have here is called the Thinking Aloud. Thinking aloud or silently brings into the picture a very fundamental question. What thinking is and why do we think? These questions arise from the assumption that the thoughts are self-generated and spontaneous. But actually, the brain is only a reactor, not a creator. It is very difficult to accept this because we have for centuries been made to believe or brainwashed. That is very difficult to accept my statement that there are no thoughts at all.
Well, you seem to be taking a position which we would categorize as being very materialistic and very mechanistic, that the brain is nothing more than a machine or a computer.
It is actually a computer, but we are not ready to accept it. For centuries, we have been made to believe that there is an entity, there is an I, that there is a self, that there is a psyche, that there is a mind, and so on.
A soul, so to speak,
soul,
or spirit.
If you accept the fact, it may not be a fact to you. We may not accept it. You will most probably reject it, and most people will not hesitate to reject that there is no such thing as a soul, and soul is created by the thinking of man. We have been fed on this kind of a bunk for centuries. The diet were to be changed, we would all die of starvation.
Well, we have many words for things that are intangible. We talk about love or honesty or integrity as if they were real objects, and yet they're not objects so much as qualities or processes.
I'm afraid we are drifting away from the basic question. If you do not want a thing, is there a thinking? Wanting and thinking go together. And thought is matter, you see. So you use thought to achieve either material or spiritual goals. But unfortunately, we place the spiritual goals in a higher level and consider ourselves to be very superior to those who use the thought to achieve material goals. So actually, whether you call it spiritual or material, even the so-called spiritual values are materialistic in their values. So it is matter. Thought is matter. And as I said at the very beginning, thought is not a creator of thought. It is responding to the stimuli.
In effect,
so what is there is only the stimulus and response. Even the fact that there is a response to the stimulus is something which cannot be experienced by us except through the help of thought, which creates a division between the stimulus and response. Actually, the stimulus and response is a unitary movement. You can't even say that there is a sensation and you have no way of experiencing even the so-called sensations we think we experience them all the time, cannot be experienced by us except through the knowledge we have of the sensations.
And we infer from all of this that there is a self, that there is a mind that is mediating between the stimulus and the response.
What is there is only the knowledge we have of the self, the knowledge that we have gathered from or passed on to us from generation to generation. And through the help of this knowledge, we create what we call self, and then experience self as separate from the functioning of this body. So is there such a thing as a self? Is there such a thing as I? For me, the only I is the first person singular pronoun. I use I to make the conversation simpler and call you you and I, but there is simply what we call I is only a first person singular pronoun. I don't know if we...
It's a part of speech.
Yes. Other than that, is there any such thing as I? Is there any such thing as a self? Is there any such entity different from the functioning of this living organism? See, somewhere along the line of evolution, I can't even make a definitive statement and say that there is such a thing as evolution. But we assume and presume that there is such a thing as evolution. And somewhere along the line, the human species experienced this self-consciousness which doesn't exist in the other species we have on this planet.
I mean, you seem to be suggesting it's a product of our language.
Not necessarily the product of language. See, the very experience of what we call what separates us from the totality of things. The problem is, and that is what I want to emphasize, the whole nature is a single unit. You see, man cannot separate himself from the totality of what we call nature. Unfortunately, through the help of this self-consciousness which occurred somewhere along the line, he accorded to himself a superior place and placed himself on a higher level and treated himself, and we still continue to treat, as superior to the other species of life that we have on this planet. That is the reason why we have created this disharmony. That is why we have created these tremendous problems, ecological problems and other problems. Actually, man, or whatever you want to call him, cannot be separated from the totality of nature. That is where we have created one of the greatest blunders, and that unfortunately is the tragedy of man.
Don't you yourself say at times that there really is no problem, that since we are part of the totality of nature, nothing really is wrong, even if we're doomed?
No, but we are not ready to accept the fact that there is no problem. Actually, there is no problem, but we have only solutions offered to us, and we accept the solutions offered to us by those whom we consider to be in possession of the truth, in possession of the wisdom. And those solutions do not help us to solve the problems at all, you see. So we replace one solution with another solution. The problem is the solution, and the solution has not helped us to solve the non-existing problem. So actually it is the solution that has created the problem, and we are not ready to throw the solution out of the window, because we have a tremendous confidence in those who have offered these solutions are the things that will free us from the problems that the solution has created for us.
What you seem to be saying is that we think that the solution to the problems of the world is that we can use our mind, we can act rationally, we can develop ourselves, we can become enlightened, we can get involved in social programs, and therefore we can solve the problems of the world, which you're suggesting really only exist as problems because we believe we have a solution for them.
What I'm trying to suggest is that there is no such thing as your mind and my mind. For purposes of convenience and for want of a better and more adequate word, I can use the world mind. The world mind is the totality of man's thoughts, feelings, and experiences passed on to us.
The world mind.
World mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it is that has created you and me for the sole main purpose of maintaining its status quo, its continuity. That world mind, if I may use that word, is a self-perpetuating one. Mm-hmm. And its only interest is to maintain its continuity. It can maintain its continuity only through the creation of what we call the individual minds, your mind and my mind. So without the help of that knowledge, you have no way of experiencing yourself as an entity. You see, this so-called entity, the I, the self, the soul, the psyche, or whatever word you want to use, is created by that. And through the help of that, you will be able to experience these things. And so what we are caught up is in this vicious circle, that the knowledge gives you the experience, and the experience strengthens and fortifies that knowledge.
And you seem to be suggesting, if I understand you
Yes.
correctly, then that I'm a body here and a brain, and my brain serves as some kind of an antenna. I'm receptive to these thoughts that are coming to me from the world mind, and they give me the illusion that I am an individual self, that I have a mind even.
Yes, but is it possible for you, let alone the mind or the entity or the I or the self or the soul or whatever you want to call it, to experience your body as a body without the help of that knowledge? You see, for example, you look at your hand, and is this hand yours? First of all, the hand is created by the knowledge you have of that.
Well, what you say reminds me of experiments with people who have been blinded, and then their operations are performed and they see for the first time, and they don't know anything. They have to be taught to recognize the things that they see.
Yes.
So without the mediation of the mind, if the mind is not trained somehow to recognize this, you're right, it would all be meaningless.
You see, we have only these senses.
Yeah.
The sensory perceptions do not say that this is a hand. You see, the knowledge that we have tells us that this is a hand, and that this is your hand and not my hand.
Otherwise, it's just a patch of color and form.
No, you don't even look at this hand. You have no way of looking at it, you see, except through the knowledge you have of this hand. This knowledge is put into us during the course of our life. When you play with a child, you tell, show me your hand, show me your nose, show me your teeth, show me your face, and what is your name. This is how we build up, you see, the identity of the individual's relationship with his hand, with his nose, with his eyes, and with the world around, you see. So do we look at anything? You see, this so-called looking is a blurred experience of yours, but you have no way of looking at anything at all except through the knowledge. So it is necessary for us to have that knowledge. Otherwise, it is not possible for us to function sanely and intelligently. It helps us to function sanely and intelligently, and we have to accept the reality of the world as it is imposed on us. Otherwise, we have no way of functioning sanely and intelligently. We will end up in the loony bin singing merry melodies and loony tunes. So it is very essential for us to accept the reality of the world as it is imposed on us by culture, by society, or whatever you want to call it, and leave it at that and treat it as functional in value, and it cannot help us to experience the reality of anything.
But there may be a mind independent of culture. There may be a mind independent of any knowledge that we have, that which receives culture.
That is an assumption on our part that there is a mind. As I said before, the totality of your experiences, feelings, thoughts, is there any such thing as a totality of thoughts, feelings, and experiences? We assume that there is a totality of your thoughts, feelings, and experiences. Are there thoughts? Even that I question. There are no thoughts, but what is there is only the activity about thoughts. What we call thinking is only a dialectical thinking about thinking itself. We use thoughts the non-existing thoughts, to achieve a goal, to accomplish, attain a goal, whether it is material or spiritual, it really doesn't matter. So we need this to achieve our goal. So if you don't want a thing, there is no thinking at all. Whether you want this material goal or spiritual goal, or whether you want to be an enlightened man or a God man, or whether you want to run away with the most beautiful girl living next door to you, the society may condemn such a thing, but basically the instrument which you use to achieve your goal and act, you see, to achieve your goal is only through the help of thought. Otherwise, any thought that is born out of that, it creates misery for you, because any thought that is born out of thought is destructive in its nature, because it is interested in protecting itself. Thought is a protective mechanism. It isolates you from the totality of the nature, which cannot be separated from you. So the difficulty here is that it is impossible for you to accept that you are not separate from the totality of things, you see, then what you call nature, that every form of life, you see, is also part of this nature. And when I use the word nature, you see, I use in the general sense, you see, not that I have a special insight into nature that others don't have. You are not separate from the nature. The nature means the world around you. All the species that we have on this planet are integral part of this what we call nature. It cannot be separated from that. But unfortunately, through our thinking, we have succeeded in separating ourselves, and through the help of this knowledge, we continue to maintain the continuity of the knowledge, and that is the reason why we have invented all this, the integrity, becoming one with the nature and all that kind of a thing. And we are not going to succeed because we don't understand and realize what is it that separates you from the totality of things is the thought. And the thought cannot be used to bring about an integral unity. Basically, we are all integrally united. And unfortunately, through our thinking, we have separated ourselves, and we are acting from this point of separateness, and it is this that is responsible for the chaos in your personal lives, for the chaos in the world around you. I'm giving a talk, but
well, you've certainly addressed many ideas and stimulated many thoughts in my mind.
Yes.
Maybe they passed through. I don't know. But let's step back for a moment. You seem to have said that all that we know is by virtue of thought. And yet we can't even know thought itself, because every time we look at thought, we don't see thought, we just see thoughts about thought.
Yes, even the thought we are talking about is created by the knowledge that is given to us. So the thought is a self-perpetuating mechanism. And when I use the word self, I don't use it in the sense in which we used by the philosophers and metaphysicians, so like a self-starter.
Or auto-perpetuating.
Yes, perpetuation. It is not, see, the body is not interested in that at all. The actions of the body are responses to the stimuli, and it has no separate independent existence of its own. So unfortunately, time is the one that has created the beginning and end, and it is interested in permanence, whereas the functioning of the body is immortal in its own way, because it has no beginning, it has no beginning, it is not born, so it has no death, you see. So there is a death to the thought, but not to the body. I don't know if I make myself clear.
Let me try and paraphrase you.
Yes.
You seem to be suggesting quite a fabric of many intertwined notions here, and one of them is that thought tends to perpetuate itself.
So it does not want to come to an end.
The mind wishes, the mind doesn't exist, but even so it wishes to believe it is immortal.
It is immortal. You know, it is interested in creating an artificial immortality of an entity, soul, self, or whatever you want to call it. It knows in a way that it is coming to an end somewhere along the line, and its survival and its continuity, its status quo depends upon the continuity of the body. But body is not in any way involved with the thought because it has no beginning, it has no end. It is the thought that has created the 2 points. See, this is the birth and that is the death.
So our illusion that we have a mind is born out of fear.
Of fear. So we do not want the fear to come to an end because the end of the fear is the end of the thought. If the thought comes to an end, the body drops dead there. You see, what is left after that is something the body does not know. For you, I am alive and dead, I am talking. Not I am alive and not dead, because I am responding to your questions, I am answering to your questions, but there is nobody who is talking.
There's no you there.
There is nobody who is talking, but there is only talking. It's just like a tape recorder, you see, and you are playing with the tape recorder, and for your own reasons, and whatever comes out of that is what you want to hear from this tape recorder.
Well, you seem to be taking a position almost equivalent to that of the physicists who look at matter, and they look at atoms and molecules and then particles and beneath particles into quarks, and finally they say there's really nothing there.
You see, one of these days the scientists will have to come to the terms that their quest to find out what they call the fundamental particle, they don't realize that the fundamental particle does not exist, and they are not ready to accept that. And once they come to terms with that and accept that there is no such thing as a fundamental particle, and that there is no such thing as great big bang, whatever they call it, it is an exercise in futility. They will continue to dabble with that. You see, find out answers for that question only for their Nobel Prize, but not for any other
But you
reason.
seem to be saying that the body exists, that the brain exists, and that nature exists.
But that has no beginning and no end. That's all that I'm emphasizing. So since the body is not born, so it has no end. You see what?
Well, I don't know when you say the body is not born. That seems to contradict
It
my...
is the thought that has created the body and established a point and says it's born here and it's going to end there. So it is the thought that has created the time factor.
I mean, but every cell was created from a previous cell, even the egg.
We don't know the beginnings of it, you see. So the whole concept of the creator is redundant. We are caught up in the field of logical thinking, and that there is no beginning, that there is no end. Is something which shatters the whole fabric, the foundation of our logical thinking.
Yes, it does.
So we are not ready to accept that at all.
But I don't know if the notion of no beginning and no end, I can see how that might apply to time and space, but not to the body.
This body you talk as if it is separate from the totality of the universe or totality of nature or whatever you want to call it. It is the thought that has created the body, a separate entity, and tells that this has a beginning, this has no end. You see, this is the end, that is the beginning. You see, it has created the space. So thought creates the space, thought creates the time. So it cannot conceive of the possibility of anything outside the field of space and thought. Actually, the thought is the one that has created the space and experiences the space, but factually there is no such thing as a space at all. But what is there is space, time, energy continuum. It is a continuum, but it has no end. You see, the thought cannot conceive of the possibility of a movement without a beginning and without a point where it is going to arrive someday or sometime, you see. So that is the problem of the thought. So its actions are limited to its perpetuation, its continuity, its permanence. But anything it says about, anything it tries to talk about, deal with or experience the body, it cannot, because it's something living. Thought is something dead.
You seem to be saying, if I can summarize your thoughts, that we are trapped in the prison of our own thoughts, and this prison creates the illusion that we are separate, that we are not part of nature, and yet the prison itself is also an illusion.
The prison also is created by the thought, and that is the reason why it is trying to get out of that trap it has created by itself. You know, there is a simile given in one of the scriptures in India. The dog picks up a bone, dry bone, there is nothing there, and then it bites, you see, and the bone hurts the gums and the blood comes out of it. And the dog believes, imagines, experiences, feels, whatever word you want to use, that the blood which is coming out of its own gums is from the bone. So that is the kind of trap in which the whole structure of thinking is caught up, and that's all the time to get out of that, you see, the trap it has created.
That's the human predicament.
That is the human predicament.
Yuji,
yes.
Thank you very much for being with me. We're out of time now.
All right, thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us. Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we're going to be examining the concept of enlightenment. Why is it that people throughout the world, in almost every religious tradition and cultural tradition, pursue the notion of enlightenment? What is enlightenment? Is there such a thing? Is it possible to attain enlightenment? With me today is Mr. Uppaluri Krishnamurti, a world traveler and author of Mind is a Myth and The Mystique of Enlightenment. Welcome, Uppaluri.
Thank you.
You know, people often have referred to you as an enlightened being, and I know you're very uncomfortable with that. In fact, you told me earlier you're uncomfortable with the concept of being at all.
Yes. You see, the question arises only in relationship with becoming. And enlightenment is also becoming, you see. So I would go one step further and say that the human mind, if I may use that word, quote and unquote, is interested only in sensual activity. You know, the living organism or the human body, or whatever you want to call it, is only responding to the stimuli. It is not interested in pleasure at all. See, the moment you use thought to experience anything in terms of pleasure, it becomes a pain for this body.
And yet we pursue sensuality and yet find only pain in it.
But we love pain, in other words, and we enjoy pain and call it pleasure. You see, the human body is not interested in pleasure of any kind. It is only interested in maintaining the sensitivity of the nervous system and the sensitivity of the functioning of the body. So the moment you say a particular sensation is a pleasurable sensation, the demand to make it last longer goes with it. So then the demand to make the pleasure last longer turns what we call pleasure into pain, and that's a painful sensation to the body. The body is trying to be rid of that pleasurable sensation, and what we are stuck with is pain.
It almost sounds as if the greater the pleasure, then the greater the pain must be.
We have introduced the degree into that, what is called pleasure, you see, because the thought is always interested in more and more of something and less of the other. I am not saying anything against pleasure. See, the moment you use thought as an instrument to have pleasure, we have there created a problem. Since man has realized, since I don't like to use the word man or a human being or in general terms, the average man, see that man is you and I sitting here. So since this demand for permanent happiness is something which cannot be achieved through anything, any thinking that is open to us, we have projected and created what is called enlightenment, God, self-realization, call it by whatever name you like. So that is the ultimate pleasure.
There are stories out of India, you've probably heard, of great saints who are supposedly in states of perpetual sexual orgasm.
That is what these gurus are selling in the marketplace today. You see, even sex is something that the body does not care for. It's a painful thing, and that is necessary for only one purpose, to reproduce one like that. The living organism is interested only two things. It's a survival, and then it's the reproduction. So when once the thought is involved in turning sex into pleasure, we have created a problem. It is the same thought that makes you feel that, you see, the pleasure, you see, can be extended into one of degree, into longer and longer time, and then, you see, keep it going, and so it is more painful to this body.
You almost sound Victorian in your approach here.
I am not Victorian. The sex is totally unrelated to the question of enlightenment. You see, whether it has become fashionable these days for all these people to market sex as the means or the stepping stones to enlightenment. But actually and factually, the sex is totally unrelated to what is called enlightenment. Whether you deny yourself sex or indulge in sex, it is of no importance to what you are searching for. But in a culture where, you see, the denial of sex is maintained as a sine qua non, or an essential thing for your spiritual goal, unfortunately, the gurus in the marketplace who are selling that enlightenment invented this thing called tantric experience, and use that as a means to achieve your spiritual goal.
Right, it's either tantric here or abstinence there, and what you're saying
both
is...
are the same. They are totally unrelated to the question of enlightenment. When once, you see, the question of enlightenment or the demand for an enlightenment is freed from sex totally, either as a means to it or the denial of it as a means to it, we can look at it in a different way and ask the question, is there any such thing as enlightenment at all? We have accepted, taken for granted that there is such a thing as enlightenment, but we never questioned that, because when once you question the whole idea of enlightenment, or as you put it, the concept of enlightenment, we are questioning the teachers who have talked about it, and we have invested our tremendous faith in them. So the sentiment comes into the picture, and we accept that as a gospel truth.
Well, yes, we have this notion of the great sages of antiquity in many different cultures have written and talked about higher states of consciousness and enlightenment.
That is true, but I am questioning the very consciousness itself. Is there any such thing as consciousness? That is my question. So you become conscious of yourself and the world around you only through the help of the knowledge that is given to us by these so-called sages, saints, and saviors of mankind. So is it possible for you to be conscious of anything without the help of that knowledge? So we have to question the very thing that we have taken for granted. We are very naive and to accept it, and then, you see, spend the whole lifetime in search of whatever you want to have, it enlightenment, God realization, self-realization, or what you have.
In other words, it seems as if there's a paradox here, because on the one hand, our consciousness, it seems as if it leads us to question the tradition, the so-called truths that are handed down to us, and you're saying, but without that tradition, without those truths, we would have no consciousness.
You know, that is part of the structure of our thinking. You see, unfortunately, the thought has divided itself into two, and created, you see, this duality or the neurotic situation for us. The whole culture teaches us that you should not compete. Competition is to be eschewed. Ambition is something which you should not, you see, have.
spiritual teachings tend to say this.
The spiritual teachings, yes, always
I mean,
demand,
certainly in
demand
athletics and in
demand-
capitalism, there is this sense of
demand
competition.
that you should be free from ambition, you should be free from greed, you should be free from this, that, and the other. But at the same time, ambition is absolutely necessary for survival in the society in which we are functioning today. So it is that has created the neurotic situation for us. We want pleasure, and at the same time we know that the pleasure is giving us pain. So the demand for permanence is the basic demand of thought. You see, it is interested in permanence. The permanence not of this living organism, but the permanence of the continuity of thought. So the body knows in a way that it is permanent. You see, not in the sense in which we know that this is permanent, that is not permanent, but that knowledge is of a peculiar kind that it knows it is permanent. So it is not interested in the idea that this is coming to an end one day, you see. So the one that is involved in this pleasure moment is the one that is asking the question, what will happen to this living organism when it dies? You see, for the body, there is no such thing as death at all.
Now,
so because it has no way of experiencing the fact that it is alive at this moment and that it is dead after 60, 70, 80 or 100 years at all.
are you saying then that the body doesn't die, but what about the spirit?
That is the belief, the self, the soul, the spirit, and whatever you want to call it is invented by thought. And it is that thought that is responsible for experiencing this, what we call thought, because what you call self, spirit, or soul, or whatever you want to call. I don't want to indulge in the frivolity of the root meaning of the words. You see, you know, the Latin word, spirit is a Latin word.
They have to do with breathing, generally.
It means breathing.
Mm-hmm.
So you have observed, you see, a certain individual stop breathing, and that condition you described it as death. So the fact that you see that breathing stop, you want to know if there is anything that will continue after death. You see, it is that is interested in demanding to know what will survive this condition of the body which is called death.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to think that my body will not survive. My body will decay, but perhaps my ability to experience at some level will survive.
But can you experience your body while you are living now? You see, if one wants to know anything about death, he has to find out what is it that is there now and not wait until what we call the death that takes place. So do you have any way of experiencing the fact that you are alive today? I say no.
Oh.
You see, the doctor comes and examines you and tells you that this is your blood pressure, this is the temperature for your body, your heart is breathing, your blood pressure, so on and so forth. So you are alive. So you are trying to use that knowledge and experience what you call a living being. But without the help of that knowledge, which is passed on to us by observation of all these doctors, and experience and tell yourself that you are a living being. So when once you are freed from the knowledge, you have no way of experiencing that you are alive today, and there is no question of experiencing when you are dead. I'm giving the talk.
Well, Descartes, a great Western philosopher, said, "I think, therefore I am." And you seem to be suggesting that thinking is the opposite of living.
I think that Descartes, I studied Western philosophy, and he asked a wrong question and answered it in a very funny way. I think, therefore I am. But he never asked the question which you should have asked, the way the Indian philosophers did. If you don't think, are you there?
Uh-huh.
So the basic question which we have to ask is, what is thinking and why do we think at all? If you don't think, there is still the question there, you see. The question is born out of the assumption that there is something there, and that is why he has come out with this statement, I think, therefore I am. If you don't think, where is that I am?
Mm-hmm. Well, isn't it true that when we talk of enlightenment, the great sages of India have said when you stop thinking, you can enter into this vast ocean of bliss, and that's enlightenment.
The bliss is the bliss, or whatever you want to call it, is essential pleasure that we are indulging in. They may have experienced some extraordinary moment, which he described it as a bliss, and tried to share it with us. And that created the problem of us all trying to experience the same thing. So that is the way the knowledge is passed on from generation to generation. That is the way you are also experiencing things. Without knowledge, you have no way of experiencing anything at all. And when once you experience, that experience strengthens and fortifies the knowledge. So this vicious circle goes on and on and on and on. And that structure has no way of breaking through that, vicious circle. Mm-hmm. So we accept that knowledge is necessary for us to experience, and the experience strengthens the knowledge. So do we really want, to find out, or demand the way out of it,
Mm-hmm. Yes. How is there a way out?
There is no way out. Because the question is posed by the thought, and by asking this question, the thought knows that it has no answer. So that is the only way it can maintain its continuity. The thought has invented time. The thought has invented what is called space. Without the help of the knowledge we have of space and the knowledge we have of time, there is no time, there is no space. The scientists may talk and say anything they like, but they are also saying that there is no such thing as time, there is no such thing as space, there is no such thing as matter, but what is called space-time continuum. Is there a space? I question that. Is there a time? The moment the thought is born, the time is there. So it is that has invented what is called the timeless, and pursuing that timeless, and it knows that it has no way of putting itself in a timeless state because the thought has to be absent in a so-called timeless state. It is an invention of the time to perpetuate itself within the field of time.
Well, it sounds like we're trapped.
We are trapped, and the very demand to get out of the trap is really the problem. Mm-hmm. There is no answer to that at all.
Well, are you suggesting then that in the history of humankind there have never been enlightened persons?
No, I am not for a moment saying that there is no such thing as an enlightened being. We have plenty of them, you see. But I question the very the demand to be enlightened. You see, as I said at the very beginning, to me, there is no such thing as enlightenment at all. See, the enlightenment is in the future. As I said a while ago, it is the time that has invented the thing in the future. Mm-hmm. The future is always, it puts the enlightenment there. So the enlightenment is part of the knowledge that is passed on to us from these great teachers who claim to be enlightened people. And it is the past that is in operation here, projecting into a future a thing called enlightenment. So first of all, is there any such thing as the present? I say there is no such thing as present. There is no such thing as now. There is no such thing as the moment here. Because if you say this is the moment, this is the present, this is the now, you have already brought into this picture the past. In the past I was not enlightened, so I am going to be enlightened tomorrow. But what about now? So am I enlightened or am I not enlightened? What is it that tells me that I am enlightened, that I am not enlightened, that I am free and not free? It is the knowledge that tells me that I am not free, that I am not enlightened. So if you are not enlightened now, you are going to be enlightened tomorrow. I don't know if I make
Well,
myself
there's a
clear.
paradox here somehow, because I guess it strikes me that if one is really enlightened, there's a transcending of space and time, so that if one is enlightened, it's always there.
So assuming for a moment that there is an enlightened being,
Yes.
he has no way of telling himself that he is an enlightened man, and there is no question of his trying to enlighten others.
I mean, as soon as I say I am enlightened, I've already come back.
The knowledge about enlightenment passed on to us from generations tells you that you are an enlightened man. You see? So then naturally you want to enlighten others. So it is a petty little experience which has become possible for me through the help of this thought. So what I experience and call an enlightenment is a thought-induced experience and not really an enlightenment at all.
You mean every description of enlightenment is essentially an illusion?
Why are we concerned about enlightenment at all?
Well, it seems like...
A way out.
Yeah, what else is there to do?
The way out, you see. So you are putting off the problem to a future date. What I am suggesting is that there are no problems at all. You see, what we are stuck with is the solutions offered to us by the people who you think and I think are in the know of things, that they have the right solutions for the problems. But those solutions have not helped us to resolve our problems. But somehow we are caught up in this field of time, and time is hope. You see, it tells us that by repeating the same thing over and over again, you will be able to solve this problem. So these solutions have not helped us to solve the problems at all. We are looking here and there and everywhere to find out somebody who can offer us another solution to solve our problems. But one who is interested to resolve the problem must be ready to brush aside, you see, all the solutions offered by these saints, sages and saviors of mankind in the past and in the present and yet to be unborn.
In other words, to truly be free, to truly be enlightened, one has to give up every concept of enlightenment or every notion of this tradition that we've inherited.
You are talking as if the concept and you are two different things. The demand for enlightenment and you are two different things. So there is no way you can separate yourself from the concepts.
But you just said that's essential to do.
That is essential to do is a manner of speaking, is a way of putting things.
It's essential and yet impossible at the same time.
You are not ready to come to terms that there is no problem here and that you are stuck with all the solutions offered to us by those in whom we have absolute confidence, faith and trust, and yet they don't work. The instrument which we are using is the one that is born out of hope. You see, what you are today is the totality of all your thoughts, feelings and experiences. That instrument is the only instrument we have, and it is a very powerful instrument. That instrument has helped us to achieve whatever we have achieved so far today. So we are not ready to discard that instrument. And at the same time we know that understanding through the help of that instrument has not helped us to resolve our problems at all. And yet we have not given up our confidence, tremendous faith in the instrument which we have been using to achieve our results. So that is really the crux of the problem. So when once the understanding dawns on you that is not the instrument which will help you to understand and solve your problems, and that there is no other instrument, the demand to solve the problems ceases and instantly. So there is no such thing as understanding at all. How I stumbled into this is something which I have no way of knowing. This is somehow it dawned on me that the intellect which I have developed through sharpening it, using it, has no way of understanding anything. And at the same time, the tremendous faith in that instrument is lingered. You see, that is the only instrument. I do not know of any other instrument. That's the only instrument I have. And it has not helped me to resolve anything, to understand anything. And somehow it dawned on me that that is not the instrument and there is no other instrument. So that means it knocks off the whole basis of any other way of trying to understand anything. So the whole idea of intuition goes down the drain and down the tube.
Why? Why does intuition go down the
You see,
tubes?
intuition is nothing but a refined, sensitized thought, if I may put it that way.
Yes.
So, but it is still, you see, caught up, you see, in this, the use of thought to resolve, you see, the problems.
Well, wouldn't it be better at least to have refined, sensitive thoughts rather than crude, unsensitive, insensitive
Well, what is the
thoughts?
difference? What is the difference between a crude thought and a sensitive thought?
Well, in Western tradition in the 18th century, we had a notion of the enlightenment, which meant, you know, being free of superstition, at least being able to see things as they are.
But are we free from superstition? Why do we swallow everything that every scientist dishes out every day? You see, we say it is scientific, but it is not so scientific. They are as dogmatic as the religious people of the bygone days.
Mm-hmm.
But because what science has given us, the technology, we invest tremendous faith, you see, in the scientists. Every 4 years, you see, their theories are changing. As I said the other day, their interest in trying to find out the fundamental particle is research in vain, but they will go on and on and on and on and on. They are not going to give up anyway.
I mean, the intellectual effort to solve the mystery of the physical universe is in vain.
Is in vain, because of the fact that the scientist is separating himself from the universe. It is a single unit, you see. The nature and man are not two different things. As I said before, a while ago, or last time, that somewhere along, you see, the evolutionary process, this self-consciousness occurred in the human species, you see.
But how do you know we're not actually separate? How do you know that the self-consciousness is not valid?
You know, it is the thought that creates the space, as I said. Thought is space. So let me give you an example.
Okay, we have about a minute left.
This is in touch with this.
Yes.
What is it that tells you that this is hard? The knowledge that it is hard is the thought, and the thought creates the space between the two and tells that this is hard. Otherwise, there is no space between the two, and there is no way that the sense of touch can tell you that this is hard and not soft.
I mean, even something as basic as the sense of touch, something we take so for granted, is really just another thought process.
Another thought process. So thought is a space, thought creates a space, and in that space we function.
Mm-hmm.
So the space is something which can never be experienced by thought. So
we're trapped in our own thoughts, and our thoughts can never really even see themselves.
it has no way of looking at itself. You see, what you see there, the very question, is there a thought, or the interest, the demand to look at thought is created by thought. So what you see there is about thought and not thought itself.
Uppaluri Krishnamurti, thank you very much for being with me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for being with us.